using tackles, and every year I could enjoy every.
I feel like you can't call it an NRL Magic round without magicians.
How would that translate in the hard-hitting world of rugby league?
I think they'd be good with the sleight of hand, the
Yep.
deft passes.
Maybe the dummy?
Yeah, but when it comes to putting their body on the line, I think they'd probably get really seriously injured. We need to do something about the amount of time it takes a sin-bin player to exit the field. What about any player getting sin-bin for the Titans? We say if you get off in the next 10 seconds...
We'll sign you up to another team.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of the Voluntary Tackle, the only NRL podcast contemplating voluntary euthanasia after hearing about Mitchell Pearce's selection in Game 3 for State of Origin. I'm your host, Aimon Brown, and today on the show we have a very special treat in store for you because we've managed to land the signature of a Newcastle Knights legend in Robbie O'Davis. We had a fantastic conversation with Robbie. As well in the show, we'll sit down again with my old man Charlie, because I've got to say, he's riding a wave of popularity at the moment. A lot of positive feedback for Charlie, which has already gone to his head, frankly. So I took this show as an opportunity to deflate that ego as much as I could. Hopefully you enjoy that one as well. But look, before we go on, I've actually received a listener question from one of our regulars. It's Media Watch Mario. G'day, Mario. Now, he approached us on Twitter and he had a question. And he asked, when will you come clean about Chip Jones, the international man of mystery? Is he really a 007 agent, or is he an Iranian superior cell agent? Look, it's a great question, Mario, and I've got to say, this is actually quite an awkward one to answer. Because look, what a lot of you don't know about Chip, and this is all jokes aside, Chip's facing a bit of a personal battle in his life at the moment. What you all don't know about Chip actually is he's a musician, which is pretty sad. Now, what that means is generally he's pretty poor. I was over at his house a couple of months ago. It's very sad. He was eating old stale Sayo biscuits. Can't even afford Vegemite to put on it. It's very hard to watch. So, he's in a bad place. So he hasn't been able to take his usual chair. Basically, he's shit broke. I mean, I don't know if that point's not coming across or not, because as we know, musos are just a very small step up from an old man dancing on the street with his trousers around his ankles. But, I really do appreciate your concern, Mario, and thanks for writing in. And what I want our listeners to do, our core listeners, or listener, could be singular, judging on the data. What I want you to do is go onto Twitter, if you have a Twitter account, and I want you to tweet at Chip Jones Lives, all right? And I want you to let Chip know that it doesn't have to be this way. He can get back in the chair, have a bit of self-respect, and get a real job. At the same time, if you could just include the hashtag Chip2, that would be fantastic. So thanks for your concern, Mario. And look, another little thing before we get into the show. Now, a lot of it was recorded before the news, before the heartbreak. And the heartbreak I refer to, obviously, is the news that Mitchell Pearce has been selected in Game 3 for State of Origin. Now, it was a day of mourning. It's this day and 9/11. Maybe the Bali bombings. That rounds out the trifecta of how I felt when I heard the news. But look, I know I cop a little bit of criticism at times. People say I'm a bit too harsh on Mitch. And look, that's clearly true. I am a little bit too harsh on him. I'll give you my take before we get into the show. Now, I get the feeling that Brad Fittler loves the idea of giving Mitch the ultimate redemption story. I mean, he's a good man, and on the surface, that's a really nice thing to do, right? But is Mitch worth the risk? That's the question I'm posing to our listeners, to the rugby league community. Look, he's had more psychological damage done to him than Tina Turner when she was married to Ike. Now, at this point, he's basically a domestic violence victim. And my question is it fair to make Mitchell Pearce face his abusers in the biggest cauldron imaginable? And I've got to say, another concern I have is in Game 2, this was Jimmy's team. The successful Blues team in 2019 was Jimmy Maloney's team. And knowing Mitchell Pearce's playing style, which is to handle the ball a lot, because he is a highly involved player, will it become Mitchell Pearce's team? in Game 3. So that's a concern I have, how they're all going to work that out. I know that they've played together, they won a comp together in 2013. To be completely honest, I think that Jimmy Maloney is more of a half these days than a number 6. So will it require a shift? I guess I have to reserve judgment until we know exactly what positions everyone's going to play. But for me, for the Blues to be guaranteed success in Game 3, James Maloney should be in the 7 since Nathan Cleary's not there. But I guess time will tell. Now, having said all of this, and I apologise, Mitch, I'm sure you're not listening. Why would you? This would be just another form of psychological trauma for you. But I genuinely hope he has a blinder. I really do. I've got nothing against Mitchell Pearce personally. This is coming from a New South Wales fan who still feels the scars and the hurt of the last 10 years. And Mitch Pearce, to me, was very central to a lot of that. He doesn't have to wear the blame exclusively, obviously. That would be absurd. But he was a big part of it. And to me, he is still afflicted. But I do hope he goes out and has an absolute blinder. I love my state no matter what. But I can tell you one thing for sure. I'm now way more nervous knowing that Mitchell Pearce is going to be in the halves for New South Wales. And another big question I guess I'm going to have to throw out to the listeners, for something to marinate on. What if we lose? What will Mitchell Pearce do then? Okay, so he's been probably, to a larger degree, unfairly maligned for most of our losses. Obviously, he hasn't got a good win-loss ratio at this level. That's been well documented. But if he comes in for this big redemption story and Queensland do what Queensland do best and from an underdog status pull an upset, what will that do to Mitchell Pearce then? I have genuine concern for what it will mean for his career, for him as a person. If he thinks it's bad now, I mean, to me, it is huge amount of pressure on Mitchell Pearce's shoulders. And look, it's largely undeserved pressure. I think if he does lose, he might have to leave the country. Just do a 1,000-year Kentucky in Chernobyl or something, because I don't think Australia is going to be the place for him. Certainly not Newcastle, not New South Wales. You can't live in Queensland, obviously. They just tie him up in the town square and make fun of him. So he can't do that. So he may have to emigrate to a country that we don't know exists yet. Obviously, I hope that doesn't happen. So Godspeed, Mitch, for all of the shit and stick we give you on this show. Mate, it's never personal. We just call it as we see it. And I do hope you have a great game. May your passes be accurate. May your legs be nimble. And may your snapshots, if required, for the first time ever, be fucking accurate. Please.
Old man, look at my life. I'm a lot like you were. Old man.
Well, look, back by popular demand, what do you think it is about your dulcet tones that resonated with people so much?
So where did this resonate from? Or how many listeners out there? 2?
I think there's about 9 of them.
There's 9 of them?
Yeah.
So
And 4 of them got in touch.
that's 4. That's just under 50%. So that's pretty good.
Well, congratulations. You have certainly improved our standing in the podcast world. Our hate rating is now down 3 stars. So I appreciate that. There's a few topics. Obviously, we're going to roll pretty loose today, Charlie. There's no particular agenda, but look, that is the show that I run here. We certainly don't plan anything out.
By the seat of your pants.
That's
No,
right. I think
know.
it'd cut against the grain of the show, I think, to have any plan or knowledge of the game.
Chaos, it's called.
Well, look, we're actually going to start, Dad, with some breaking news, and that is on George Burgess. Now, we're recording this on a Tuesday night, hoping to have this out relatively soon. Now, he got 9 weeks for that rather aggressive eye gouge on Robbie Farah. Do you think that's a fair punishment?
I think everyone thought he was going to get that. About 9 to 10, he just hasn't got a good record, has he?
Well, I think
Maybe he likes eyes. I don't know what the story is there.
because this is the second eye gouge that George Burgess has been guilty of in under 12 months. He did it at a test match as well. As you said, is he partial to just eye sockets? Maybe he has some kind of fetish.
Maybe, but doesn't he know there's cameras on every inch of the ground? You know, Did you really think he was going to get away with that?
I kind of agree with you because it wasn't one of those incidental eye gouges. It was a prolonged divot into Robbie Farah's left eyeball. And funnily enough, for someone that had just been gouged so horribly, Robbie didn't seem to take it so badly.
I think he did it in a way, but it seemed like it was in slow-mo. You know? It seemed to go on forever. So I thought it might have been doing like they did back in the old days of Western Suburbs when the replays came first in. There was an incident in the scrum with the Western Suburbs hooker, and Ron Casey was famous back then as a commentator, and he replayed it about 4,000 times, and it looked like the man was hit 4,000 times.
So the actual the number of replays condemned the person.
Ron Casey kept replaying it one after the other, so he finished up doing about 16 weeks. He only hit him once, but according to Ron, he hit him thousands of times.
Ron Casey, he passed away, hasn't he, recently, Ron Casey?
Yeah, I'm sure he has.
I'm sure he has.
Unless he's 120.
I think he died of acute bigotry from memory.
I loved him. Good man.
Good man. Yeah, a polarising character. It's probably the best way of characterising Ron Casey. But look, no, it is an interesting one because I think if someone was trying to blind me, I'm trying to put myself in Robbie Farah's position. So I'm walking along the street, I'm about to buy a pie for some reason, and another patron's decided to put their pie on the ground and jam their thumb into my eye socket for about 30 seconds, pretty aggressively. I don't think I'm going to be happy about that. But Robbie kind of walked away going, well, that's footy. Whereas I think I would have been throwing some big punches. I might not have been landing any, but I might have been throwing some.
I think so. What is this, an ad for Garlo's Pies? Or
I never said Garlo's. I just said a pie.
I just thought Sean Garlick's famous.
Great pies, though. Thin pastry. They're beautiful.
Yeah, big on meat, I suppose.
So my question to you, Dad, is... I'm waiting for your answer.
So I was too busy thinking about the pie.
Don't you think Robbie Farah should have been angrier for the amount of time?
He was angry, but he couldn't move his body. His arms are pinned. He's only his face.
Yep.
So he was angry, but
what are you going to do?
The expressions are all there, but everyone's looking at his eyes. That's all.
Now, we did talk about this off air, but the Burgess brothers, as a trio, of course, we always exclude Luke because he wasn't good. But as a trio of brothers, they are particularly illegal, aren't they? If you actually add up all the accumulated weeks between Sam, Tom and George that they've been suspended, they've probably got a world record in the NRL for suspension.
I don't know about world record. I know there's between them 27 suspensions between them. And
in their total NRL career.
Yeah, and Thomas has got 3, so you do the maths and work out the rest.
So Thomas is actually fairly law-abiding compared to George.
It's only, reasonably.
3, that's not too bad.
Yeah, that's run-of-the-mill, isn't it?
I mean, Mitchell Orbison's probably done 3 over the years.
No, he's a clean skin, mate.
He's probably, you never know. It's a rough and tumble game. He's probably inadvertently pulled off a crusher or something at some point. We'll have to look into that. We'll get one of our research lackeys to jump onto the illegalities of Mitchell Orbison's record. But it does obviously beg the question, is there such a thing as an evil twin and a good twin? Because it seems as though at this point, George Burgess is clearly the evil twin.
Well, maybe he's the lucky one, or the unlucky one. He's the one getting caught all the time.
Maybe that's it. Maybe he's just getting more game time because Tom's not very good.
Oh, it's true. He's a better player than his brother.
Now, you yourself, Dad, are a twin. So I'm interested to get your insight into whether or not you feel as though there is such a thing as an evil twin and a good twin. And I also want to know, if that is the case, are you the good twin or are you the evil one?
Don't start me on my evil brother. So does that answer the question?
Is it start in the womb? Is it a matter of sort of like tussling around, for the placenta or something like that? Is that how early it starts?
Mate, the brain wasn't working in the womb. You for real?
I don't know. Sometimes it's not working for me in my 30s.
Well, I always thought my brother was, I think it was a mix-up at the hospital because he looked completely different to me. He had dark hair, I had blonde, and all the rest of the cousins had blonde, but you go and figure out. But I've always said there was a mistake and they got him from the Italian section.
The Italian section, like there's a deli of babies. Well, they've gone, I'll have the cabanossi and the really dark-skinned baby, please.
Well, I had blonde hair curly, you're dark and a pigtail at the back. You go figure.
Well, here's the question, Dad. In terms of your parents, you may have been the one that was like brought in as a kind of rookie. Maybe you were the ring-in, is what I'm saying. Is there a chance? I mean, were your family generally fair-skinned, or did they all look Italian?
Well, as I said, most of my cousins look a bit like me, but my brother was completely different.
So your twin was the outlier, and I'm assuming you're kind of angling at the fact that he was the evil one and you were the good one.
That's right. He cost me a beauty contest, and I haven't forgotten it.
How did that happen?
Oh, we were parading around. I looked $1 million, and he was walking around with his straight hair and his pigtail, and we come second.
This is amazing to me. This is a revelation. So how long were you in the beauty pageant industry for, Dad? This is all news to me.
No,
Are you sort of like an older version of Joe Benet Ramsey? I mean, how long have you been doing this for?
Don't be ridiculous. It was one. I can't even remember it, but I remember the photographs.
Were you ever wearing a tiara? These are the questions that are going to be vexing for me from now on.
Now you're being silly.
Okay.
Boys don't wear tiaras. I had a funny looking nappy with a number on it.
Oh, to be a fly on the wall during the childhood, Dad. But look, we'll probably move on from the Burgesses. There's a really interesting story I was reading about during the week, and I needed to get your opinion on it, Dad. I'm not sure if you're across this or not. But in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, rugby league has finally been recognised as an official sport. Is this going to be a case now that we're going to start channeling young talent from the streets of what was formerly known as Zaire, and we might just have an influx of Africans who are very good at the game? It's a very exciting time. Would you, if you were given free tickets to go to the Democratic Republic of the Congo and watch a rugby league match, would you do it?
Well, that's a good question. Maybe I will, but I believe there'd be a lot of headhunting going on over there. But
you mean literally headhunting?
Literally, both ways.
Or just being like offered a really good job on LinkedIn?
Down in the Congo, yeah, I'm sure they'll be taking people's heads off.
So I'm very interested. Where have you got your knowledge of this country from? I take it you've really got to grips with their political system, you know about their social eccentricities, and you've come away with they're all headhunters.
Growing up watching old Tarzan movies, don't be silly. Of course, I know they're headhunters. Take your head off.
That's where I've taken all my cues on Africa. Johnny Weissmuller.
Yeah, he was my god. But to say that, but we got enough islanders anyway from the Pacific Ocean playing the game anyway. Why do we want to go to the Congo for?
Isn't it just more talent though? That's a good thing, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, I suppose so. But then it's weakening our own homegrown talent.
Why is that?
Well, they're not going to get a game because they're big. They're bigger and they can run.
Oh, because they're better. Well, that's a good thing.
Not necessarily better, but they're big. They're big units, aren't they?
They are big units, and I guess in junior footy that's an issue because a Polynesian kid tends to be a lot bigger than an Anglo kid.
Well, he's bigger than me. I was watching the game the other day. The 8-year-olds are bigger than me. So they've got to go back to the old days when I was growing up. Actually, we had weight scales back in the late 50s when everyone's the same weight. Go figure. Now these island boys are twice the size, 3 times the size of Anglos, and there's no weight scale. So it's crazy.
So you think we should go back to weight for age?
Should be the weight, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm inclined to agree with you, but we have drifted from the old formerly known as Zaire country. I think rugby league should have lines in the water everywhere. Be nice to be. In fact, I'd like to see us fishing for talent in Iceland. I don't care where we go. The rugby league needs to rule the world. Kind of in a nice version of ISIS. You know how ISIS wanted to rule the world? But I want it to be the NRL, and we would obviously be a lot more benevolent and far less beheadings, unless, of course, Todd Carney somehow became president.
That's a bit crazy. Just mentioned Iceland and Congo. What are you going at? What do they have? Ice blocks for heads over there, will they?
All right, we're going to get on to some more relevant rugby league topics, Dad. And one of the big things, obviously, State of Origin Game 3, it's happening Wednesday week. New South Wales have firmed into hot favourites after the back of their Game 2 performance. But the big controversial moment in terms of Blues selection is no David Klemmer. Now, he came back and he obviously had probably our best player in Game 1, got injured, has been out, came back last weekend, I thought played a blinder back from injury, and Freddie has decided to not go for him What are your thoughts there? Do you think that's a good or a bad move from Brad Fittler?
I think it's a bold move. I think he's stuck with the winning team, and so full marks to him. You know, even, I know Clemmer came back, but he did win the game. He was in the losing game, the first one. So, and he's just stuck with it. You know, that was his teammates actually putting him out.
That's true, but I guess that Safidi's just come into the team, hasn't he? I mean, surely he can wait his time and they put Clemmer back in there.
Well, it's a bit crazy because he played in a winning team. So, and then you've got Clement. I don't know.
Well, I want to take that philosophy one step further. So I'm going to go back in time. It's 1986. Wally Lewis had a blinder in game 1, but he's done a thumb injury, so he's out for game 2. And then Queensland's won in game 2. Does that mean you don't take Wally Lewis into game 3?
Well, bad luck, Wally.
It just seems odd to me. I think you take your best 17, you know, regardless of who's won and who's lost. If you're going to rate individual performance, surely David Clemmer finds a spot somewhere.
Well, Fittler's always been out there, even with the controversy over the second team anyway. So
yeah, largely a beat up, wasn't it?
Touch about it.
Yeah, I think we said actually on the last show that it was a much better team that we'd picked for game 2. When we're both reasonably confident. I'm assuming you didn't see a blowout score like that happening in game 2. I certainly didn't.
No, I didn't see the score. But with the rain, I think I might have said we win by about 8. With the rain, they played dry weather football.
Just whacked a 0 on it, and won by 80.
Yeah, they just. I think the score wasn't as close. It shouldn't have been a blowout. It was a bit tighter than what the scores indicated.
What about Tommy Turbo, Dad? He had an absolute mammoth game. Is he one of those players that people have underestimated? That, you know, everyone's thought he's good, but maybe they weren't aware that he could go to this level. I think I might be a part of that. I didn't think he could be this good.
I thought he was coming back. He's only playing his 3rd game. He's always been a brilliant player. His best position is fullback, but he just he blew everyone's out of the water with his performance. The other unsung player was Tyson Frizzell.
Yeah, Frizzell had a great game.
He had a sensational game. You know, the best I've seen him play.
And he's done all that with just one testicle, because you know he had one of them removed, I think, earlier in the year.
You're getting off the game. I don't know what you're talking about anatomy for, but
I'm saying, would he have been better with both of them?
You'd have to ask Tyson about that.
The other big talking point, Dad, is actually about Nathan Cleary. Now, he's racing the clock to be fit for game 3. You know, this whole syndesmosis versus a sprained ankle. I mean, everyone turns into a physiotherapist, I find. You can have someone that can barely string a sentence together at the pub, and yet they're now diagnosing injuries in sort of the same speak as an osteopath. It's a very concerning thing for me. But what they're saying is he's a big chance of making it, about 80-20. Regardless, would you take a risk and have Nathan Cleary in your team, or would you prefer to go with another half?
Well, don't ask me to pronounce that word he just said. But,
yeah, I know.
It's a debate. I've always believed if you're not 100%, you don't play. So if he's 80, 85%, he doesn't play. So there was a thing on that in the second half when he was off that New South Wales put on 20-0.
Is that right?
Yeah, when he didn't come back on. So.
But the floodgates did open, didn't they? In the back end of the game.
Yes, but he wasn't on the field.
True. So. But, you know, that's like one of those causation things, isn't it? Is it the fact that, you know, Queensland just capitulated and it just happened to be when Nathan Cleary went off? I actually thought he was probably having his strongest Origin game up until he got injured. Even though he wasn't setting the ground on fire, by his Origin standards, I thought it was probably his best game.
I thought he was dynamic in the first half, but mainly with his defence. He was aggressive. Yeah. He was aggressive in defence and aggressive with his running. But his defence, he improved 300%.
Yeah, I agree with that. If for example, Nathan Cleary wasn't cleared to make it back into the team, I want to tax your brain again, Dad. What are you doing about the number 7? Who are you putting in there?
I think Jimmy Maloney have to go to 7 and probably put Wade Graham at 5'8" or Jack Whiten.
Yeah, they're the two options being discussed, I've noticed. Now, if you put Wade Graham to 5'8", though, are you losing that kind of dynamic impact off the bench? He was so good off the bench in game 2.
You are to a degree, but he's such a good footballer, I think. Doesn't matter if he comes off the bench or as he's on the run-on side.
Now, on that same topic, Mitchell Pearce, he's been mentioned. He came out during the week rather angrily. He was very upset, Dad, because the rumour had gone around that Mitch had been faking injuries. Every time he was potentially available in game 1 and 2, he very conveniently had an injury. Do you believe in this? Do you think Mitchell Pearce is faking injuries to not get the pressure of the cauldron? Because he has come out and said that he's rubbished the claim and said, I'm ready for game 3 if you need me.
I thank God he's not going to get. I hope he doesn't get picked. And he hasn't been picked. There's a bloke who played last week and he failed to find touch and 2 free kicks. So he just hasn't. To me, I'm glad he's not playing.
But in Mitch's defence, the sideline, it's a tough target, isn't it, when you're kicking for it? To find it, you have to have absolute precision.
Especially when you're trying to gain 80 metres, all you do is kick the ball out.
What would let's play the devil's advocate here. Say Mitchell Pearce gets picked. How confident would you be that we'd go on and win the game?
Not with Mitchell playing. We'll go down about 3 out of 10.
Now, people have a go at I think people have even criticised this podcast, Charlie, for being too harsh on Mitchell Pearce. People think it's misplaced criticism and it's not all Mitch's fault. And that's a part of that's true. But certainly a part of it is he has consistently failed to rise at key moments in big games.
Exactly.
And
right.
look, we're Roosters fans, so you tend to look at your own team a bit more closely than others. And we felt the same way. In 80% of big games, Mitch Pearce would do pretty bad things at key moments or go missing. And I think he did that at Origin. That's just, my personal opinion. What do you think's driving that? What's the difference between someone like Mitchell Pearce and, say, Cooper Cronk, who seems to rise in those moments? What's going on there?
I think it's a difference between the two players. Cronk's a professional and poor old Mitch, he seems to panic when the pressure's on, and I think he's a bit robotic when he plays, especially when I was watching many times for the Roosters. He'd be passing to Boyd. He'd have 5 players outside him. He'd see Boyd Courtner. He'd keep passing to Boyd Courtner all the time.
Yeah.
All that. He seemed to panic when if he had an overlap and he had more players, his brain didn't seem to get around it. So he still passed to the same player.
Which is a shame, right? Because his skill set, if you're just going to go on skill set, the guy's fast. The guy has a bullet pass left and right. He can kick a ball a fair way. But he just lacks the sort of, I think, the finesse of some of the other halves. The subtle plays. We've even talked about it before. Sometimes he plays a bit too far before the line, even if he has a really good step.
It's probably manifested this year. He's played to be fair to him, he's played the best I've seen him play in his whole career. Consistently. Normally he'd play 1 or 2 games and then for the Roosters and then the next 3 would be shocking. He used to disappear. He'd play a brilliant first half for the Roosters. The second half, different player. Where was he? It's not the same player as he was in the first half or the second half.
Yep.
So he wasn't consistent like the great players in both halves.
No, and in fact, in my view, he really had a half of football that was very good. He used to string together good minutes. He was more of a minute man for me. He'd have a good 3 minutes there, a good 30 seconds there, and then he'd be bad again.
You're right, because funny thing, when he used to score early for the Roosters with the big step, and that was the warning sign. He wouldn't side him again. So he in his mind, he said, I've done my job, I scored the try. And that was very strange for a player to just disappear after scoring a try.
Yep, it's odd time. So I certainly hope, like yourself, Dad, that he doesn't get picked, but I guess time will tell. I'm getting a feeling that Nathan Cleary will be fit and he will play. I think because he almost looks like he's a cyborg, like he's been cloned from one of Nathan Cleary's ear hairs. And so he's almost got these robotic powers of healing. So I'm pretty sure he'll be fine. Even if he can't get over the sprained ankle, I think he just grow another ankle and run on with that.
Now you're being a bit crazy here with his cyborgs and growing ankles.
He's sort of like, I think he's the result of some kind of advanced stem cell technology, Nathan Cleary. There's something not right about him. And I'm going to start with his chin. It's unusually angular. That's all I'm saying. But we will move on from Nathan Cleary. We need to talk about Tariq Sims. Are you a fan of Tariq Sims, Dad?
Yeah, he's a good player. Yeah.
Solid player, isn't he? He's a big unit.
He's aggressive. Yeah. Well, yeah.
And people weren't writing home about him in game 2, but I actually think he's one of those big bodies that helps coming off the bench. But he's in trouble, and I think we're going to find out tonight, because tonight is Tuesday night, whether or not he gets cleared for his shot on Michael Morgan. Now, I have to put this out there. I think it's a joke that he's been cited for that. I didn't think it was late or high. Are we starting now to go too far in trying to protect halves? When a half runs right into the line like Michael Morgan did and then passes, surely he's risking a hit if he's running at the line like that.
Well, that's right. He's putting his body on the line. But I looked at that like you, and he wasn't even looking at him. He was looking sideways. So I think I'd be very surprised if Tariq does any time over this. He hit him, but he wasn't even looking at him.
It's where we're going, though, Dad, aren't we? We're going down the road of... I'm all for protecting halves from dog shots. We don't want to see those, the Adam Blairs, as we refer to them. But when it comes to actually having a half been able to run almost with impunity at the line, we don't want to see that either, do we? I mean, you know, the brave halves do run at the line, but they run knowing that they might cop a shot every now and again.
They cop a shot as long as it's not a cheap shot.
Exactly.
He pass the ball. It's just if he runs to the line, he's risking his body.
And I've got to say, I mean, people are going to, accuse us of bias, I'm sure, but Hargraves got suspended over that shot on Ponga, which I'm still convinced it certainly wasn't high, and it was marginally late at best, and he got 2 weeks.
Yeah, he wasn't injured either.
No, well, I mean, Ponga did have a bloody nose, because Hargraves landed on top of him, and that's just footy, though. That happens.
Never saw it.
Got those tricoloured glasses on again. But I'm just saying, I think that's the mindset of the judiciary, that they're definitely going to take a harder line on protecting halves. And so I'm worried about Sims missing this game. And if he does, that'll mean David Clemmer will come back into the team, apparently. He's on the cusp. And the other person who's on the cusp is our man Clint Gutherson. He's the 18th man. If Nathan Cleary can't make it, the big call is that Gutho will probably come onto the bench. What are your thoughts on Gutho?
Gutho's a great player, but I'd hardly call him a utility player. But it's a weird call. I don't know where he came from.
Where would you play him if you had to?
I wouldn't play him.
He'd be the bus driver. You can drive us there, Gutho.
Don't
and
make
if
it
you like,
ridiculous.
you can give Damien Cook a foot massage, but then you need to leave.
He's a good player for the Earls, Gutho, but I think it's a bit too soon for him, and especially being on the bench. No,
fair enough. And a huge blow for the Queenslanders again, Dad, to stay on State of Origin. Kalen Ponga is out. He is not going to be playing. And Kevin Walters has named a team with Corey Norman in it, which who would have thought we'd see the day where Corey Norman of WhatsApp fame, who has been recorded doing all sorts of things from, lines of coke, going out gambling with bikies. Here he is wearing a Maroons jersey in Game 3, the Cauldron in Sydney. How's he going to go?
I think it's great news for New South Wales. Bring him on.
Will he measure up? Because he's actually, by his standards, he's had a pretty good year this year. He's I know that the club is struggling. The Dragons haven't been going particularly well, but Morgan's got them home in about 3 or 4 tight games by himself, a couple of times of snapshots.
You mean Norman?
Yeah. So, I mean, by his standards, he's actually playing pretty well. Do you think he'll stand up or will he be crunched?
I don't think he's playing that well. I watched it quite a few times. He just sort of disappeared from the game at times,
You've never been a fan of poor old Corey?
You're putting words in my mouth again.
And predictions, Dad. It's time for some prophecy. How do you see Game 3 going? It's in Sydney. We do look like we have the team to do it. Queensland look weak, but as we know, in Origin, when Queensland look at their weakest, they're at their best. And that's the little bit that worries me.
They might be. The worry about that, they dropped poor old Dylan Napper. That was one of their best players. Sorry. I was only joking there. I wish he had played.
Yeah, I know. I got to say, I'm pretty sure I saw Dylan Napa in Game 2 ordering an Uber Eats at one point. He was very distracted. He didn't decide to turn up and actually ruck up the ball at all. Remember that big claim he made leading into Game 2 that even with his broken wrist, that he would be the pack leader? I mean, he was just lying, wasn't he?
It was a big call because he's not a pack leader in with a good wrist.
I know. Do you know what they should have done? I think that this should be a rule that they mandate where any forward that's struggling for form, like Dylan Napa is, they allow him to come on the field with nunchucks. Just one nunchuck each for every forward that's not averaging the metres that they should. And, in the same way horse racing have handicaps, with the weights. I think that maybe rugby league could benefit from a handicap system.
Yeah, you're going a little bit crazy. Are you talking about horse racing with using batteries in the whips? Or?
Well, they have the weight on the horse. The better horses get weighted down more. So maybe that, with the lesser forwards, they get armed with sort of medieval weapons.
You're digressing. I thought this was a serious conversation, but nunchucks.
It's rarely
You're
serious.
losing the plot. How many beers have you had?
It's very, very rarely serious. I want your predictions, Dad. Scores for Game 2. Scores for Game 3. Again, it's all come down to cynical betting. I need you to let the listeners go to Sportsbet, put on the multi. What are you choosing?
Is that listeners or listener?
I don't know. They may have tuned out by now, but we'll find out. What do you think the score will be?
I think the Roosters. I got off my head.
Just for listeners, do not put a multi on the Roosters winning Origin. Please don't do it. You're throwing your money away.
The Blues will win, but it won't be the big avalanche like they did in the second. I think they win by about 10.
10 points. Yep. And who will be first try scorer?
Wade Graham.
And who will be man of the match?
Tyson Brazil.
Wow, imagine that multi. Do you know, in the weird world of betting, Dad, and I'm certainly not advocating it, gamble responsibly, everybody. But the thing you can do, I've noticed, you can do futures betting, and they're already letting you bet on the Clive Churchill, right? So you don't even know which teams are going to be in it. So imagine you put down, you put Tyrone Roberts. I mean, I think you'd be at 1,000,000 to 1 because the Titans have got to make the grand final, which I think is statistically impossible. But then even if they got there, he has to be man of the match. So it's an unusual thing. So even for good players, you can get like 100 to 1 shots on, teams that are running about 7th or 8th. If they have a run, get into the grand final, and then that player plays well, you could buy a house on the back of that.
That sounds like a real mug punter an analogy. You finish up with your old pockets hanging out.
Hey, I'm not saying stake $1,000 on it, but maybe put 5.
You put the rent money on it. That's what used to happen in the old days.
I know what would happen, if you had an inside word that a player was about to do a swap. So say it's, we'll stay with Tyrone Roberts, and he's about to swap to the Melbourne Storm. So you put $1,000 on him now, and then when he swaps to the Storm, he has a realistic chance of making a grand final and maybe becoming man of the match.
It's a far-out suggestion. Poor old Tyrone. He's got a poor old rough head, hasn't he?
He has an unusual head. Do you know who he looks like? He looks like Brandon Smith. They've both got those heads that look a bit inflated, like someone's attacked them with a bicycle pump.
It looks like a horse I backed last week, the beaten favourite.
But he's a pretty bloody good player, though, Roberts.
He has his moments.
Yeah, he's got a great skill set.
He blinks a lot, though, doesn't he?
He's a big blinker. Can you tell the listeners, Dad, I love this part of the podcast where I can actually drill down into your own eccentricities. Can you tell the listeners why you don't like the amount of times that Phil Gould blinks during any interview? Every time, just so people at home obviously won't know this, but every time Phil Gould appears on television, Dad goes, "Go ahead, mate, blink some more." And I've never noticed him being a big blinker, but it seems to really irritate you. Can you explain why it irritates you so much?
Probably number one, I don't like the bloke, but I do look at him closely, and he does. He blinks at various different stages. Sometimes it's slow, and other times it's fast. I'm sorry, I'm not going off my head, but this is what I've observed.
Okay. Well, we haven't established you're not going off your head just yet.
Sorry, I hate the slow blink too.
So what is it? So you think he has inconsistent blinking? So it's sometimes rapid and sometimes slow.
Look, I'm not like a racehorse with the blinkers on. I'm telling you, he does blink differently.
And he's blinking aside, Dad. And why don't you like Phil Gould? You said you don't like the bloke. What is it about him you don't like? Because I don't mind Gus.
I think it's just his demeanour. He fancies himself, that's all. Thinks, look at me, look at me.
Just never been a fan of him. What about as a player?
Very average. Don't start going as a player. Throw the odd good pass, but not work rate, pretty low.
Now, Dad, you've been following the rugby league for a long time, and obviously well before I was brought into the game and started watching it. In terms of, I guess, going back, say, 60s, 70s, who was the best fullback you think you've ever seen play the game in that era? So take away the modern fullbacks. In the 60s and 70s, who do you think the best number one was running around? Or probably wouldn't have been number one back then.
The two best fullbacks I've seen was Changa Langlands and Russell Fairfax.
Okay, that's interesting. And would you have a preference between the two?
I love Russell because of his flair. Changa with his great sidestep, sensational player, but Russell's the flair is just in an era which they hated. He had the long hair. They called him Fairy. They tried to kill him, but he persevered and he overcome them all.
So it was just
pull his hair out.
It was just raging homophobia back then, was it?
Well, they just didn't like his long hair, I suppose.
Yeah.
It was an era in the 70s with the long
right.
hair, but same as Schubert, but he had the best flair I've ever seen from a fullback.
So am I right in assuming that in that famous, was it 75 grand final, St George Roosters, would that have been Langlands v Fairfax in that game? Were they both at fullback?
Fairfax didn't play.
He didn't play that game?
He was injured.
Who played fullback for us? Because didn't we win 38-0 or something crazy?
Yeah, good question. I know Mays set up the first try. I'm not sure. I think Schubert did play fullback.
Okay. Do you remember where you were watching that game? Because that's one of the Roosters' proudest moments.
Television.
You what? Sorry, you were watching?
It's on TV.
Okay. And do you remember which TV set you were watching? Or were you just watching a random one through a window?
Probably an old 21 inch back in the old days.
Wait.
At the grandmother's place.
Okay, cool. I definitely didn't need the specifications for the individual TV set you were watching. I don't need brand names. I was interested to know if you were...
I just said inches, 21.
Fair enough. And back then it would have been very different, right? Because obviously you didn't have high def. So you would have been watching, I guess, silhouettes running around on the screen, wouldn't you?
Not really. It's just normal. But listen to Rex Mossop, as a matter of fact, I think. He's the one who broadcast it.
Yeah. And in terms of how much the game's changed, Dad, there's obviously a lot of great things that's happened, in the modern era. The skill sets, for wingers, for example, are amazing. But is there stuff about the old game that you miss? Is there stuff that you wish we could bring back?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's the playing off your head, the top of your head in the old days, more so than this regimentated game, which that's another reason why I didn't like Gould, because it was just like a game of chess. Rugby league's it shouldn't be a game of chess, it should be just flair.
Yep.
It's not rocket science, you just throw the ball around from one side of the field to the other. And that's what spectators come out to watch. They don't want to watch players running in one out, two out. They like to see the backs of the balls. The forwards go forward, then the backs just throw the ball around.
And you'd be around to know this, so I might be wrong, but when I look at old footage, though, it's not lots of people throwing the ball around. Like that St George era, where they won about 10 in a row, that looked like the most boring game of football I've ever seen. Because remember, you had no unlimited tackle count. Didn't they just get the forwards to cart it forward for 80 minutes?
No, they didn't. No, they threw the ball around.
Did they?
They had blokes like
Well, how come the scores back then were like 7-2?
I think it was 7.
They were low-scoring games.
Yeah, a try was only worth 3 points.
Well, it's 2 tries to 1.
No, there wasn't 7.
2 tries to 2/3.
I remember the St George. No, they had blokes like Gasnier and Raper and Eddie Lums, and they actually played great, pretty good flair. They were bloody damn hard to beat. They looked like gladiators when they ran on the field compared to the other side. To me, as a young kid, they looked gigantic.
Dad, I've got one story I want to finish off this podcast with, and it's one that you tell me. You were a firefighter for many years, And you told me a story where I can't remember if it's a grand final or an origin, and you wanted to watch it and you got called away, and it was something about a man in a swimming pool, and you desperately needed him. Was he? I can't quite remember the details, but you wanted to get him out of the swimming pool so that you could go back and watch the game. Can you tell me about that story? Are you familiar with it?
I'm familiar. I don't know what it's got to do with football. But
Weren't you trying to get back and watch a grand final?
No, we'll watch the State of Origin match, funny thing.
Okay, yeah, I couldn't remember the details. So you wanted to get back and watch this Origin match. So what happened? You got called away on a fire call, which does happen.
It wasn't really a fight. It was a call to assist police. So,
Okay.
And I said, damn it, the game's on in about 20 minutes. So we turned up at this call, and there's a chap in the pool. And I said to the commander, well, what's going on? He said, we want you to drain the pool. I said, drain the pool? Because I knew we had a Davy pump, which 6 litres a second. I went, this is going to take a while. And I said, what do you want to drain the pool for? He said, we want to get him out.
So was this guy going off his nut? Why was he in the pool?
He had trashed his mother's place about 3 doors down. Then, for some reason, he went up the road and jumped in the swimming pool, ripped all his clothes off. And
So he was naked to boot.
He was naked. He was a well-built bloke. I didn't see the bottom part of him, but the top part was pretty well built.
Okay, cool. We're talking about pecs here, I think.
It was surrounded by about 40 coppers. They're all around. And the mother of the house with the 2 children, she was covering their eyes. They were on the next ledge above, looking down.
Yeah.
I said to my senior man, I'm not going to drain this pool. I said, I've got to talk to him.
And I'm assuming in the back of your mind, Dad, you're thinking, I'm not draining this pool because
not.
State of Origin's on.
No, I will, because I worked out the time lapse is going to... And the she's got to have to replace the water of the pool anyway. It was ridiculous. Anyway, so he mentioned something about a ghost. So I said, which I knew. There was a ghost down at Piedmont Fire Station.
I'll tell you what, this story's gone down a rabbit hole.
Well, this is what happened.
Where did a ghost come from? No, proceed,
No,
please.
this is how I got him out.
I'm invested.
And he struck a chord with him, and he said, I like ghosts and all that sort of stuff. And I said, well, if you want to come out of that pool, I'll introduce you to the ghost at Piedmont Fire Station, which it was supposedly a ghost. There was another story, a long story I wanted to mention about that, about a certain shift when they come on, they're all quivering and shaking inside the one room of the fire station because the ghost appeared. Thank goodness it wasn't a fire. Anyway, I digress.
When was the onion on your belt?
Bloody onions. Anyway, so I started talking to him about that, and he went, oh, okay, that sounds pretty good. I said, well, if you just come out of the pool, mate, I'll fix you up next week, So he climbed out.
Wow.
The unfortunate part, as soon as he climbed out, the coppers jumped him, which I was a bit angry with.
Because he'd probably think you've betrayed him.
That's what I felt like, but he came out straight away. I got him out within 5 or 6 minutes.
Nice one.
Apparently he'd been there for 2 hours.
For 2 hours. And can I tell you, did you take that strategy into future calls? Did you think, I can solve everything now by just weird mentions of the paranormal?
You can't sort of analyse fires. You can't. I cannot talk to flames. This is a human being.
So you've got a building a light. You think, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a ghost story.
To the building a light. Don't be silly.
And I tell you, did you get back and watch Origin, the Origin match?
That was the good news.
Do you remember the year? Do you remember the game?
Probably about 91.
Thanks, Dad, for coming back on the show. We really appreciate your time. And what are you going to be doing for the rest of tonight?
I'll be driving home. One more beer. Got to be careful about the breathalyzer.
That's
now
all right.
I don't want to lose my licence.
Thanks for coming on, Dad.
See you, folks.
Many thanks to Charlie for coming on the show again. And in the interest of allaying everyone's fears, I just want everyone to know that every case of malfeasance against my dad as a firefighter have been dropped. And now it's actually a really special time on the podcast. It's time for our chat with Newcastle legend Robbie O'Davis. Thanks so much, mate, for agreeing to come on the potty, mate.
No worries, no worries.
Mate, I'm sorry to tear you away from the Logies as well. I don't know if you've been watching that tonight.
Logies can wait.
Okay, fair enough, Robbie. Mate, look, I'm really looking forward to having a chat with you, mate, and delving into your playing career. But I guess I wanted to start off with the 1997 Grand Final. I think when I think of Robbie O'Davis, I always think of that moment. I guess a game that a lot of people sort of view as one of the best Grand Finals ever. Obviously, you were the Clive Churchill medal winner. Do you reflect on that game as, I guess, your career highlight, Robbie? I mean, how do you view that in the context of your entire career?
Well, this podcast is up there, I guess. Do I start with the podcast? Actually, before I go indulge anymore,
Yeah, sure.
I hit Eric Gross Jr. up the other day online, and I said, mate, you do this thing called a podcast, and it says at the top all the info in my bio. I said, mate, am I a freaking dinosaur? I said, what's a podcast? What's a bio? I did not know either of them. You don't know what a podcast is? I said, mate, I must be a dinosaur. What are they? So I only just learned halfway through this week what a podcast was. So, yeah, when you were telling me to come on the podcast, I'm going, yeah, mate, what is it like? What's happening? So I wasn't religious until I found out what it was. So, yeah, I'm into it now.
Mate, well, look, I'm happy to oblige, mate, and I guess bring you into the new world of technology. I'm only just getting to grips with it myself, and I host one.
But mate, if you want to go back to the 97 grand final and you want to talk about technology,
yeah.
So this is how much of a dinosaur I am. So we were leaving the Workers Club, and I walked down the road, and all the boys were catching taxis except Joey. Joey was on his way to get Daniel Johns out of bed so he can come and entertain us for the day.
Yeah.
So Joey's gone his way because he all he kept saying is, we need entertainment at the Mad Monday. We need entertainment. We didn't know he was going to go jump on silver chairs, bloody chair, on his bed and grab him. But anyway, as it turned out, I'm walking along the road and a car's pulled up beside me. Big four-wheel drive. And he goes, mate, Robbie, you wanted on the Garth and Steve show, your radio show. And I said, mate, look, I just haven't had a sleep. I'm full as a state school hat rack. I can't talk. And it's way out Sandgate, mate. And he goes, no, just jump on my phone. And he looked I went, have you got a car phone? This is 1997.
Yeah.
Went, have you got a car phone? Are you the richest man in the world? And then he goes, jump in, ring him. So I get on the phone and I'm talking away to Garth and Steve. The first thing I said was, I'm on a car phone, boys. They said, oh, it's good. We got you loud and clear. That's great. I said, no, you don't understand. I'm on a car phone, boys. And they're going, okay, good, excellent. I said, boys, hey, I'm with the richest man in the world, you know. It was the biggest box thing you've ever seen. Oh, it was unbelievable. That was a highlight of 97, but obviously the game, the week before, the run on the field, there's so many documented stories, whether it be Chief telling him, Matty Johns, he's got a podcast now, I heard. So,
mate, he does, yeah. Very good one, actually.
So Matty's always blurting out story after story after story. And how he remembers them, I don't know, because I don't think he slept for the whole week. So how he remembers the whole lot of them stories has got me stuffed. But I think that the ones that really play in my mind are the Chiefs' speech the night before the grand final, the Chiefs' speech the day of the grand final, the way he single-handedly took them on, you know, in the first 10 minutes of the game and put them on the back foot so all us rap dancers could do our dancing and score the tries and carry on. So I lay a lot of him, what he started the game with, his energy and his violence. Physical. I remember he had Jeff Toobies. He has Jeff Tooby in one hand and throwing him on the ground and punching Spud Carroll with the other hand. He was just out of control. And Adam Muir was belting people and, you know, and then we had guys like Troy Fletcher that had hair bigger than his body. He come on, he created momentum down the field and a couple of big hits that allowed me to score the second try. And everyone played their role and played it well, and it wasn't about us at all. And that's the best thing about it. It wasn't about the players. The players went out there and we played for a town. Manly played for a team, and that's what was so special, and that's why we won it. And, mate, to come back and party with the town opposed to go back and party with the team is pretty special. And the rest was history, because some of the partying stories and some of the photos of the guys partying, it's pretty bloody good.
Absolutely, mate. And some of them have gone down almost in history as bigger events than the game itself. A couple of those post-match interviews.
Guys getting Joey tattooed on their bodies and stuff, that's pretty good. Before the game, I sort of looked around the stadium. It was such a big part of my life at that time, you know, first grand final and 40,000 people in the stadium and 39,500 on my Newcastle people, and the rest of them were probably just my family from Queensland, the Aboriginal side of me. And, mate, honestly, I just looked out before the game and I went, geez, that looks slippery. The ground just looks slippery. So I had these old sprigs that you have to, you know, the nylon sprigs, and you have to undo them with the tightener. So I grabbed, they must have been 2-inch steel sprigs, and I took these little nylon ones out. Yeah. And whether they're legal or not, I think they're illegal. And I just stuck these 2-inch bloody sprigs in the bottom of my boot.
Yeah.
When that fight happened, when Jeff Tooby got hit around the ears by Chief, and Chief was hitting the spud. Someone, I think it might have been Cliffy. I think it was Sam Nevin, didn't kick the ball out. So I caught it, and it was like 5 minutes in the match. And he didn't kick the ball out from the penalty, and I caught it. And as I took off, these things dug into the ground. I come to the defensive line, and they dug in the ground, and they shot me out of the ground like a bullet. And I was gone. I was just straight through the line.
Yeah.
But the guy who kicked it was Shannon. Shannon Nevin kicked the fullback, so he wasn't there. And I was gone. I was going for a try for all money. But unfortunately, Tooves, they still knocked out in the back play from what Chief done to him. He just happened to stand up and I tripped over him. so I got cranky at Chief. I said, mate, why did you knock him out? You could have just given him a bit of a touch up and just not put him back there. Because, mate, the first touch of the game, and Matty John says it was the most fantastic touch in the whole game. It just went bang and I was gone. And I put it down to these 2-inch sprigs that just shot me out of the ground.
That's amazing.
And then obviously, a little bit more dancing went on and the tries got scored and then whatever else happened after that. But yeah, that was pretty good. That was pretty good.
That's how tough Tooves is, Robbie. He's even when he's knocked out, he's still a menace. He's even acting as a speed hump.
No, I think I put a couple of them bloody 2-inch tags into his chin. Oh no, that was Dukes did that. That's right. Sorry.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. That was one of the big moments out of the game as well.
Wasn't it?
Look, Robbie, you I guess referred to something before. I think it's really interesting. You know that '97 grand final in a way was a little bit bigger than the game, wasn't it, for Newcastle? Given what the town had gone through with BHP, can you tell us a little bit about what it was like going back to Newcastle after you'd lifted the trophy? I mean, what was the vibe like? The celebrations? It looked manic.
The trip down, that was the one that made us rock stars. So as we're heading off on the bus, the people seeing us out of town, even the semi-finals, you had 10,000 people seeing you out of town. By the time the grand final come, there's 100 people they said when we back Newcastle for that ticket tape parade and stuff. But I guarantee by the time we got to Wallsend, everyone had either doubled around the front of the bus or the bus was long, just the roads were lined with people. So I reckon a good 30,000 people by the time we got to the highway. And
wow.
The reason why we thought we were rock stars was we're going on the highway and girls on the back of trucks with their tops off, just showing their boobs and stuff. And we obviously sit there just going, mate, if we just become ACDC, like, this is unbelievable. Oh, I was thunderstruck. So
wow.
we're telling the bus driver to turn around and go back. Forget the game. We're trying to have a good sort.
Bit of a distraction there, Robbie.
It was, mate. That made us not spill the ball, that's for sure. So we had extra motivation. And mate, we come back into town, and the way we come over the top of the lights, and they said, near Marathon Stadium, and they said, just jump out, put your bags here. We'll go straight in the Workers Club and have a bit of a get together and invite your parents and everyone. And yeah, rightio. So it was apparently the club or someone had already invited all our parents, all our girlfriends, and everything to be in the club waiting for us when we get there. And the ones that were on the buses with us and all that sort of stuff, they sort of just mingle along with us. So rightio, we got off the bus, and then we put our bags in our cars, and we jumped in the bus, and then cars. I think they stayed there for a month. We didn't go. No one could bloody get sober enough to drive their cars home for a month.
Yeah, I bet.
So then we just went over, and by the time we got into town, it was just, mate, there was the horse with the knight on it led us through the streets, and mate, how someone didn't hit that horse on the arse and make it, pig root, and I don't know. It led us through. Everyone was so well behaved. It dragged the bus through. The horse spread people apart, and we just come through. By the time we get there, mate, there was people on top of the bus, in trees on top of the bus. There was guys jumping on cop cars. It was just crazy. And I remember going up on the stage, and as we went up overlooking on the main street, Chief had this 100-kilo freaking trophy, the big Optus Cup trophy, hanging over the edge, and there was thousands of people behind him. If he slipped, mate, people are dead. He's just hanging over the edge, just shaking the trophy, and the bouncers jumped on top of him. He'd have to pull him back.
Mate, that'd put a bit of a dampener on the celebration, wouldn't it?
Oh, wouldn't it? Harry can kill 3. Tooby and 2 others.
That's it. You can see the Newcastle Herald headline from here. You must have felt a bit like you were extras in Game of Thrones or something, with a horse leading yourself through the main street of Newcastle.
How they didn't let that bloody horse... how didn't go mad? It's long gone now, unfortunately, mate, but Rocky or something, I think it was called.
Yep.
But, mate, that used to walk every horse out onto the racetrack in Newcastle. So that was it'd been amongst big crowds before, obviously, on big occasions. So it knew how to handle them. But to actually walk through a crowd and have an opportunity to get hit on the bum by some drunken bloke, how it didn't happen, I don't know. Because if that thing goes mad, who's got to stop a 1-ton horse?
That's it, mate. And I can only hope the night mascot, whoever was on top of the horse, was actually a jockey as well and had the a bit of finesse, could control it if it got out of control.
He was the same bloke. He used to be the guy that rode all the horses around, led the horses around the stage at the track at Newcastle racetrack for 50, 40, 30 years.
Wow.
He'd done it forever. So yeah, same bloke, and he always rode this costume out on the field for us, and he's a bit of a legend, that bloke.
Yeah, I bet he's got some stories to tell as well. I might get him on the next episode. Robbie, just back to that 97, the actual game itself. I mean, you scored a double in that one. I always wonder, obviously you had a blinder. When you score a great a try, especially a solo, I mean, can you savour those moments like actually in the moment, or is it all a bit of a blur?
The first one was... It was something I dreamt the night before. The way it all happened with the dance and all that sort of stuff, that just come from me watching a movie called The Last Boy Scout, and Bruce Willis did the Jigger Joy up on the light just when he shot everyone at the end of the movie. So I went, I like that, Bruce. I'm going to do the Jigger Joy, and I watched it the night before the game.
Wow.
So anyway, and then the big rollover with the arm was, that's just bit stupid. I just seen Dukes coming, so I just done the yeah, baby. I don't know where that come from, but mate, the first one was Terry Hill was in a match the week before, the 2 weeks before, I think, the week before or something, and he scored a try. And as he scored a try, he got dug in the right ribs, and he was carrying the right rib for the rest of the game. And that night, I was just closed my eyes, put my head on the pillow, and went, geez, if I get a chance on Terry Hill's right hand side, I'm just going to go bury straight into him and see if the ribs are sore.
Wow.
So from that scrum, I've turned to Matty Johns and I said, Matty, I need the ball. And he owns it. Him and Joey own that part of the field. Up close to the line, they just take over.
Yep.
And he looked at me and said, no, I got it, mate. And I went, no, just, mate, I've got something. I want to do something. Give me the ball. Go and slip to Matty. I said, give me the ball. I need the ball, Matt. And then he goes, no, I got it. So he turned back to Matt, Andrew, and he's called the ball from the scrum, and the bastard's passed it straight to me. So I sort of half switched off. So by that time, I'd looked out, and I've already told Owen Craig if I get it, come under me. So I actually turned, and as I turned him under, I turned back to dig into Terry's right-hand shoulder to check the ribs are there. He wasn't there. He'd gone on holidays on the left-hand side of the field somewhere. So when I turned back, he wasn't there. I looked at Danny Moore, and Danny Moore was pissed off towards Adam McDougall, and I just started laughing. And I honestly laughed as I was running towards the line because I didn't know where Danny went. I don't know where Terry went. I said, this is easy. But the funny thing was I laughed because I dreamt about it the night before that. If I had got a chance in his right-hand rib, I'm going to dig into it. And the fact that it all played out perfectly, and I didn't have to dig into a rib because I think he went because he knew he couldn't defend me on that side, I think.
Maybe Terry Hill had a dream the night before that you were going to stand him up, so he went to the other side of the field or something. It's funny.
He wouldn't have dreamt that I was a big unit coming at him anyway.
Yeah. I actually I had a bit of a revisit of that try today, Robbie, in preparation for our chat, and you're not wrong about Danny Moore. You sold that dummy to him about 3 minutes before he took it.
Well, honestly, if I had to put myself in the same situation, I'd go O'Davis because I wouldn't be trying to take on Bendugal in his prime. He's a pretty big man. But why would take Dukes on? I was sort of thinking 95 State of Origin, my mate, in the Origin series and the Bloody Bullet series, I reckon Danny said, I'll just look after you here, Robbie.
Yeah, that's right, mate.
Lines, I think.
I'll give you this one. Mate,
The second one was pretty good. The second one was that's the sort of time you just go, well, what just happened? You walk back to halfway and it's not till you look up on the big screen and you actually see the cameras on yourself, and you go, oh, shit, that's on me. I must have done something good. You don't realise you just put the ball over the line because you've done it so many times since you were a kid.
Yeah.
Probably Caleb Ponga doing a little bit more than I've done. And, mate, honestly, you just walk back and go, oh, that's on me. I must have done something good. Then you realise, oh, shit, they're clapping at me. So, and then it comes surreal, I guess.
And that's what I guess what I was getting at, Robbie. Like, just, I mean, those individual moments, you must be riding on pure instinct in a way. All of those years of footy and training, you jinked around and beat 3 or 4 and just twirled over the line like that. I guess you can only sort of dream of those moments happening. And I was wondering if in the moment you could tell just how magical that was and how many times people over the next 20 years were going to be watching it on replay or not.
Well, I probably thought, why didn't I wear two-inch sprigs for all my life? First of all. And, mate, no, you know, you believe it or not, you don't hear the crowd unless you want to hear them. If you go back to, and I was primed for it, I would walk back to a kickoff, and before I catch a kickoff, I'd stand there and talk to people behind the line. I'd become popular with the Knights grannies because I'm the guy that stood back there and always talked to them at the fence and made sure they were all right before I was kicking off. When the guys are so, they're so military about what they do these days. Just walk back and wait. They won't turn around and wave to the crowd. And I was into that. I was just blessed that I got an opportunity to play in front of big crowds, and I also knew that I pay my wages. So I made sure that I'm always the first one to wave a hand and shake a hand and sign an autograph and wait around after the game. So, but you don't hear it. You get on the field, and as you're on the field, you're thinking about your game, and you can hear the crowd erupt. As you're playing, you don't. Then all of a sudden, there's one voice. There might be one voice in 30,000 people, and you can pick it, and you always know who it is. I don't know why. You just always hear that voice, and after the game, you go, oh, I said I heard. And someone comes up after the game, I actually heard you, mate. I heard you out there.
That's amazing. Like even in the just the roar of 30,000 people, you can actually single out a voice.
If you know a voice, mate, you'll hear it. It's funny. Funny as. But no, you take in the crowd when you need to take in the crowd. So if you need the motivation, something's going wrong for you, you take it in. If you've done something wrong, you don't.
Well, mate, I mean, clearly you're a player that used the crowd to your advantage, and interacting with it. Obviously, it didn't interfere with your game. Maybe other players need that focus or something, but whatever you were doing, mate, you did it right, obviously.
Yeah, I was lucky for a long time. But like I said, I always knew who paid me wages. So the people that come through the gate, they did that. And we needed. Someone actually said to me one day, there's 300 at the time, 320 people in the whole of Australia that gets to play professional sport, professional rugby league on TV out of 60 million people. It's pretty special, and for that, we've earned the right to do that. We haven't just gone and just said, oh, this kid scored a couple of tries yesterday, we're going to put him in first grade. We worked hard to make sure we're there, and I was a small kid in a big man's game, so I had to work twice as hard. And I was always the first one to train, the last one to leave, sort of thing. So, just had to work, lift twice the amount of weights in everyone, and I become the strongest man, pound for pound, the club for like 10 years, just for that reason. And then I stayed around after training. I'd make sure that Joey kicked me 10 bombs before I'd leave every training run. I did that for 14 years. So if I didn't catch one, I'd go back to one and start again. So he didn't like it, but he became a good kicker because of it.
Mate, he's a pretty good training buddy to have if you've got Joe in your team. I think if you're going to put up any taught bombs, he's probably the best in the business.
But I remember getting a phone call from Wayne Bennett one day and said, something, mate, we're going to pick you in the Origin side this week. One, because you're a good luck sharp. He said you've won 8 out of 11 Origins that you've played in so far. And he said, mate, you're actually playing pretty shit football at the moment, but you're the only person in the comp that can catch Joey's bombs. So I'm going to put you at fullback in this game, and you're going to catch Joey's bombs for me. So I end up doing that.
Mate, so it all paid off for you in the end in a lot of ways.
It did.
Mate, looking at that game, I guess myself, I regard Jeff Tuvey as probably one of the toughest guys playing the game I've ever seen. In that GF, in the 97 one, he basically got knocked out pretty early in the game, and he continued on to lay on a few tries. Who were some of the big dangers for you in that Manly team in 1997? Was there a couple of guys that were spoken about in particular as dangerous players?
Mate, Cliffy was always going to be a danger. He's just so clever. Even at the age of 78 that he's at now. He goes away and plays his old boys legends matches. He's still untouchable. You can't get him. As soon as not as in the way of he's going to dummy and run 100 metres and score. He just goes around and carries the ball in front of you, and as soon as you lay off him for 2 seconds, he'll just put a short ball in anyone's chest and they're gone straight away. If you just run the holes for him, he'll put you through every time. He's just always so dangerous, and he was our main threat. And the person that I think this is why we won the game, Jim Sedaris.
Yep.
Mate, Jim Sedaris, the minute he got put out of the grand final, I reckon that gives us a chance. He was you just couldn't tackle that bloke.
He was tough, wasn't he, Jim
Yeah,
Sedaris?
he got suspended for the grand final, and then they had to sort of reshuffle their pack around. I think Cliffy went hooker. I think he wore number 9 to get match. I think did he? I think, and yeah. So did Cliffy wear number 9? I think he did.
I thought he was playing in the 6, but
I think he stood at 6, so he wore number 9.
Yeah, you might be right, mate.
But yeah, Jim Sedaris, he got put out of the game the week before, and that was it. And that I think that gives us the grand final, because if he played, he just was unstoppable. He really was. He'd never get tackled. He'd stand there and right at the last minute, he'd pop the ball out the back and just put you on the back foot straight away. Mate, they had Big Hopper in his prime, hanging down the wing, and had a bit of a scuffle with him. Mate, Shannon Neville was so quick, and then they had good centres. Danny Moore, don't know what he was doing half the time, but he was an Australian player.
He was falling for your dummies, Robbie, is what he was doing.
He was. And then you got, mate, guys like Smith Gillespie that, I think he knocked me into, second row, just in of the grandstand in one of my runs, and he just hit you so hard. And when you got hit by him, you stay hitting and pull your ribcage out of your arsehole sort of thing. So, mate, they had big, tough asses, and I think we're just a little bit tougher on the day. And just, mate, we had 6 and 7. Any side with that 6 and 7 in, it's going to go pretty bloody good. So, and mate, the two Jones boys, they were in their prime. You couldn't get any better players in the comp than the two Joneses. And, mate, I talk about it all the time, these 30-metre passes that they chuck to each other. And they hit these, what you call the tram lines, like the last 10% of the field. And to get the ball out to the last 10% of the field where the quick men are, like, let's mention a Tomato or Darren Albert or something like that.
Yeah.
To get the ball in their hands really, really early. Mate, imagine the two Johns boys with Jesse Ramey. Mate,
I know.
Get the ball in Jesse Ramey's hands, or this Kalen Ponga hit the tram lines, this little 10% of the field. Mate, they're gone. People just can't slide across. You see how good Billy Slater was getting that tram line.
Yeah, absolutely.
Guys that have got mega speed, when you get the ball in the tram lines to them quickly, they're gone. You can't. It's undefendable.
And mate,
only because the guys hit up the middle. They hit up the middle all the time. And as they hit up the middle, everyone sucks into the middle because the big bash and barge is going on. And as soon as they suck in about 30 metres from the sideline, this is what I'm talking about. This is when these guys hit 30-metre passes like the two Johns boys really, really quickly. And then you just can't. These quick guys are just gone. You can't turn and get them. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, you can't really replace that. I mean, I always remember Newcastle being rated number 1 at being able to shift the ball laterally faster than any other team, and obviously the Johns are a massive part of it. But you were also a team that could chain pass quicker than any team in the comp as well. Was that something that you guys practiced a lot? The idea of just catch and pass. I remember that ball used to get from the left wing to the right wing in about a second.
Mate, I know the two Johns boys are white fellas, but we formed this black line, which, with Grogan, Craigie, Jason Moody, myself, mate, there was a lot of, Aboriginal kids in the back line. And by having that little black line there, we were playing a lot of like Aboriginal touch football at training and all that sort of stuff. So
yeah.
The Johns boys is such a high skill rate. And, if you ever been to an Aboriginal knockout, most of them, they don't even get tackled. It's just like they just offload. So we become doing a little bit of this. We done this thing in Fiji a couple of years earlier when we went over there and promoted our sport in Fiji. And Christ, look where that's gone now. It's Fijians.
I know.
And they play a game over there called One Touch. And that's their touch football. There's not 6 touches and you change over. It's 1 touch. If you get touched, it's the other side's ball. And it makes them really, really high skillful. So we go over there. There's myself, the two Johns boys. That was me, Matty Johns, and Big Sarjo, Mark Sarjo. We're going around the schools educating them. And we started playing 1 touch. And myself and Matty Johns, we were just brilliant at it, obviously, because we're into that sort of, touch football scene. But Big Sarjo, I don't know what their swear word lingo is over there for. He's hopeless, he's silly, he can't, mate. They were swearing at him in their lingo, but he just kept smiling at them. he thinks they would give him a rap, but I think he wasn't no good at the 1 touch. And we brought that back to Australia, and not only brought that back, we brought a lot of players back as well. The Fijians mate, there was about 4 or 5 Fijians actually come back to the Newcastle Knights side just as trialists at the time. No one ever went on with us, but I think a couple went to Canberra Raiders and stuff like that. Obviously, the Noah Nandrukas and guys like that, they become household names. who's the other winger for Canberra?
Ken Nagus.
Kenny Nagus. Yeah, so guys like that, they come back and they were just freaks of the game. So we come back and started playing this one touch, and that made us a very high skills back line. I think that sort of helped us out. And then once again, I talked about in the tram lines, you had guys like Mark Hughes that were just straight runners, running at speed, just hitting in tram lines with them. So they didn't have the massive amount of skill that the Johns boys had and all that sort of stuff. Or Darren Howe, it wasn't a massive amount of skill. He was just mega quick and never dropped the ball. And the same with Hughesy, mega quick, didn't drop the ball. So
Yeah.
So a bit of a mixture of everything, but I think that the high skill level just come from that one time we were over and learned how to play touch, and then the Aboriginals in the back line. So, and we actually, with Leo Denver then, we're actually, we called the black line at one stage, I think.
Wow.
So it was pretty special.
I tell you what, there's a name I haven't heard in a while, but I used to love Leo Dinover. Yeah, he had so much skill about him. But yeah, for some reason, I guess his name hasn't endured as much as you guys. But gee whiz, he was talented, that guy.
Mate, I just heard from him yesterday. I haven't heard him for a long time, believe it or not.
Really? What's the coincidence?
He rang up and get done the big, hey, brother, you got some tickets for me for the game? trying to bump some bicycles off me. That's what he's doing. I love
good to know he's still around and he's doing well. Mate, I don't want to harp on the game. I want to move on to a few other little things, but
Yep.
I did want to talk about the moment in the 97 grand final, obviously, the final pass from Joey to Darren Albert. Can you walk me through a little bit of that? Where were you on the field and what was going through your mind? Did you think that going the blind side was a good move? That obviously that Joey ran there and then he faked back the other way. Did you think this was going to be the moment?
I just done a kick chase down and I hit someone and I done my shoulder and I went off the field. And as I was walking off the field, they'd come back to tackling towards us. It was about a minute to go. And as I come back tackling towards us, I went to walk off and then I seen we had the ball again. And I went, oh, hang on, I'm right now. So I ran straight back out there. And as I ran back out there, was just enough time to see Joey nick off down the blind side. And then, look, the way I play, I tend to think, and I still look at it now, the way I play, that's where I would have been. I would have been right over there trying to get the ball off one of these two guys or be really close around the ball. But because I nicked off upfield, in turn, it all happened so bloody quickly. So Albie was there, and the thing that got me most about Albie is he's that quick that he had actually played the ball, and he looked away. He didn't even know where Joe had gone, and he looked back, and he was that quick to react and catch the bloody thing on his chest and score the try. It's just there's a million things that could have happened in that last 5 minutes. I think Lee Jackson made a poor decision to run from dummy half a couple of times when he can give the ball just early to Chief and pump it up and just get closer to the field goal and make it easy for us. And Lee kept on jumping out and trying to beat the marker every time by jumping inside him and pass the ball through. And I remember Big Chief just getting this look that he was going to kill him at Western. He kept doing it. And then we weren't meant to win by 1 point. Like, the ball hit the post for a reason. When Matty John's ball hit the post, we just weren't meant to. We were just meant to jam up their ass. Does that make sense? It's so nice. We're just because it'd been such a build-up. Everyone was down there, these guys were unbeatable, all that sort of stuff. It was just, couldn't beat these guys for so long, and we weren't meant to just win by field goal. Field goal would have been boring. Oh, you won by 1 point. Good on you, mate. So it meant to be like, let's just jam up their assholes. So it was a try that just broke the heart, and it broke the heart forever. Not every time you see a Manly supporter, they don't talk about the grand final they won by 50 points. They talk about the one they lost against, Newcastle Knights when they got their heart broken by Darren Albert.
100%.
They honestly do, mate. And all the players talk about it too. But my best mates in the world respect us that much that I've got Cliffy Lyons, John Hopewadi, Shannon Nevin, mate, Danny Moore. I talk to these guys on a regular weekly basis, just because they just respect us that much, and we respect them. It was just that one occasion that we just two fighters entered the ring and we fought. We come out with, had to have a winner, had to have a loser, but we fought hard.
And sometimes you get that, don't you, Robbie, in great games. I mean, that is just burned into the memory of so many NRL fans who just enjoyed the contest, who might not even be supporters of Newcastle or Manly, but you've just created a moment in time, haven't you? Like, it's an iconic match. So everyone involved probably can hang their hat on that, even on if you're a winner or a loser.
Well, it's going to go down forever as one of the best grand finals. It doesn't get any better. I think Darren Albert didn't even have a girlfriend in his whole life till he scored that try. So, and now
He's
now
still
they don't
dining
even know.
out on it.
I know, yeah, he is. He's married, has 2 beautiful kids now. But at the same time, I'm just going, listen, we talk about, and everyone goes, oh, Darren Albert, you scored the last try. And I scored the other. Hey guys, hey, I scored the other 2. Hey, no one remembers who scored the other freaking 2 tries.
Hey guys, Clive Churchill, Robbie O'Davis.
Mate, every grand final day, I do this boat cruise with Nick Livermore on the Denny. Dynamic marketing boat cruise around, and then you go into the ground and you host a box, and just with the old players, and you go from box to box and you have a few beers and you sort of watch the grand final as much as you can while you're hosting all these corporate boxes. And I took me Clive Churchill medal down a couple of years ago.
Yep.
And I put it in my pocket, and old mate was commenting. Oh, it was Frankie Barrett, actually. Frankie Barrett was commentating on the microphone and talking, and he asked me a question. And he goes, mate, these grand finals, he started asking questions about who's going to win the grand final today and all that sort of stuff. And I said, mate, these bloody grand finals are hard to come by. These bloody grand final rings hard to come by. And obviously, a young man called Nathan, what's his name? Fletch and Nathan Hindmarch.
Yeah, Nathan Hindy, yep.
Heine was standing in the room at the same time. I was saying, mate, these bloody grand finals, they're hard to come by. These grand final rings, they're hard to come by. Mate, and I went, actually, no, they're not. Look, I got one on my finger, and I had a grand final ring on my finger. I said, you see this, Heine? Yeah, piss off, O'Davis. And then I said, mate, and strangely enough, the Clive Churchills, they're really hard to come by. And I pulled it out of my pocket, and I said, oh, no, they're not. Look at this one, Heine, got one here too. And, mate, he looked at me, and Hindmarch just yells across the room and goes, what the hell have you got a Clive Churchill? I said, I don't want to pay for any piss tonight. I want to get free entry in every nightclub in Sydney. What do you reckon? But it was the best thing I'd done because a lot of people hadn't seen it before. And just to have that in my pocket, mate, everyone on that boat got to come and view the Clive Churchill and come to see the grand final ring. So it was probably the best thing I'd done. So I do that every year.
If it was me, I would have it constantly in my wallet wherever I went. It wouldn't be one day a year. It'd be 365 days a year.
Mate, I went and got it engraved out at Wall's End, and the man that owns the engraving shop at Wall's End, I said to him, mate, listen, can you just put my name on this medal here? He goes, oh, mate, just your name, or you want? I said, oh, yeah, just put my name on, it'll be good, thanks, mate. And he goes, yeah, 22. I said, okay, no worries, buddy. And I turned around and mate behind me, I said, he's going to charge me to get the freaking Clive Churchill medal engraved. Is he serious? Bastard.
Mate, that is if it's ever been pro bono work, it's that one. That should be free for sure.
I think so too, bastard. No, it doesn't matter.
Mate, just I guess on your career in general, were you always going to be a footy player? How did you get involved in rugby league?
Yeah, mate, I started at soccer. I think if you're going to ask a lot of football players, rugby league players, where they started, they all started with soccer. The hand-eye coordination is a big thing. Yeah. And then it's the bravery thing and learning how to play as a team. So soccer's a really good thing because the bravery side of it becomes the kick in the shins. The pattern wasn't so thick when we were kids. Used to cop one of the shins and you wouldn't be able to walk for 3 days. So I got really good at soccer actually. So I think whether it was just the speed, I'm not sure. I was always quick. And then by the time I got to under-12s, I was in the under-12 Queensland touring side. Who we had there? We had a guy called Craig Polomana was my centre. I was a 5'8".
Oh, wow.
We had a guy called Clint Robinson that won the paddling for Australia in the, he's a kayak paddler, I think, Clint Robinson. He won gold medals for Australia in the Olympics. So he was my second rower. So we had a couple of...
Pretty good pedigree.
Big and better things, yeah. And then, mate, I think under-12s, under-12s, I think I scored these 6 tries in one match, and the actual game was won by 36-6, and I was a goal kicker as well, so I got the whole 6 tries, 6 goals.
Bagged every point.
Yeah, but it wasn't just about the scoring the tries, it was just the way they were done, I think, and after that, you know, that's when everyone started knocking on my door at the age of 12, going, well, you just double tip someone, like you tip the first line or tip the fullback, and just stuff like that. I was just doing stuff that, you know, was probably meant for adults, not for little kids.
Yeah, right.
So then I started getting noticed from the word going. I was an Australian touch player the age of 15, and Australian touch captain actually, in the age of 15 as well. And then in the country towns like Toowoomba, where I grew up, you'd go away and work, and every week you'd have 10 guys at training for the first grade team. And my dad was the captain coach of Newtown Lions in Toowoomba. They had the same outfit as the Newtown Jets. And he would just say, mate, Robbie, just jump in the wing for us. And I did that since I was 10 years old. So I'd always fill in the numbers on the wing for the first grade side. So by the time I got the age of 15 and I actually playing for Australia, I was a little 5'8" for rugby league. Dad just said, why don't we give young Robbie a go in first grade on the wing and just trial match? And so at the age of 15, I was on the wing, and I was playing first grade against Brisbane North, and I was playing for Newtown in the Newtown Night Trials in Toowoomba. And then we sort of got through that game just as done a couple of touches as a kid that didn't get involved too much. By half time, I went into halfback and I was doing chips and carrying on and trying to take over. But I was just a really, really little kid in a man's game. Then after that, they said, you're in under 16s this week. Good trial. Go back to under 16s. And little smart-ass kid I was, no, whoa, I'm a first grader now. Go back and play under 16s, mate. So Valley's across the road. The other side of Toowoomba, they rang up and said, there's a little article written in the paper about how I'm going back to 16s, and there's a big article in the paper written the week before saying what sort of bloody dad could let his 15-year-old son play in the first grade side and all this sort of stuff. So,
Yeah, right.
So there was a bigger article before, but the team on the other side of town, Valleys, they said, we'll take you as a first grader. Really? Yeah, we'll sign you and your father. So me and Dad got signed on the other side of town. So we ended up playing together against East in Brisbane, and that was coached by Johnny Lang. So we had a trial match a week later, playing for a different side, and Dad was the front rower and I was the 5'8". I just went straight to 5'8". No mucking around down the wing no more, mate.
I'll control this team. Thank you very much.
So Johnny Lang brought his east suburb side down, and in that game, I think the score ended up similar to the one I just mentioned. It was about 36-6 or 30-6 or something, and I scored try and kick the only goal for the team, our team, and obviously the Brisbane team's going to flog it. Toowoomba team any day. And Johnny Lang just walked up to me after that and said, mate, you're coming to Brisbane. So I went from one side of town to the other side of town to Brisbane. So I went and bought a postie bike for $50. And I rode it to Brisbane twice a week to train. And, mate, I'd stand there in the huddle sometimes, and I was playing first grade. I just turned 16, and I was playing first grade in Brisbane with Johnny Lang at the age of 16. But Johnny would look at me at training, and he'd be talking to the whole team, and he'd be looking at me, and I was just staring at him really hard, trying to read his lips. And he'd look at me all the time and go, "Are you okay, mate?" And I said, "What?" He goes, "Well, are you okay? You're just staring at me. What's wrong with you?" I said, "Oh, mate, that bloody postie bike. I'm riding it all the way from Toowoomba. It's only got one gear, and all I could hear was me." That was just ringing in my ears every night. I just couldn't hear John.
So you'd have deafened you by the time you got to the game.
Oh, no, it was bloody dreadful. But we ended up playing my first game of first grade in Brisbane at the age of 16, and I scored 2 tries, and that was against Brisbane North in a proper match, not a try match this time, and I scored 2 tries at man of the match in that game, and Newcastle Knights were playing the Brisbane Broncos on the Sunday, and we played at Lang Park on the Saturday, and all the Knights boys and all the Broncos boys were there watching me in that game, and not the players, the actual officials.
Yep.
And the next morning, Knights walked straight up to me as soon as I finished the game, and they just said, "You want to come over to South Bank and talk to us about a contract?" And I went over the road, seeing the big men like the Harrigans and the bloody sergeants and stuff, and said, "Mate, I want to sign with these blokes." So I signed my life away, and the next morning, Brisbane Broncos, where I wanted to be, said, "Oh, listen, we've got an offer for you," and I said, "I'm gone. I've already gone with the Knights." Oh shit! So, obviously being a Queensland, I wanted to start there for the Bronx, but I just signed the Knights. They come offer the first contract, and I took it and ran.
Wow! So the Broncos nearly had your signature, so it could have been an entirely different career. Did you ever look back and think about what life might have been like if you'd played for the Bronx?
I I just missed Wally Lewis with the Bronx. He'd gone to Gold Coast, so that would have been good. Playing with Wally Lewis would have been great. As it turned out, I made the last ever tackle on Wally Lewis in his whole life, his whole career.
That's a pretty good claim to fame, actually.
Yeah, I know. So that was good that it happened out that way, because I got to play against Wally and I got to play against Mal Meninga and all those sort of guys. So Wally was the reason. Wally was the reason why any kid would want to play for Broncos. But so when Wally left there was all the Bronx. You still love them, but just Wally wasn't there no more. So you have to love new people. Then all of a sudden, there's Alfie. Oh, geez, look at this guy go. So the Broncos become Alfie, and then the Broncos become Steve Renouf. Then Glenn Lazarus, and then there's just a million guys come through that era that were just played brilliant when they kept on winning grand finals. But prior to that, it was pretty much just, you'd see the guys playing the Origin like the Gene Miles and all that sort of stuff, Colin Scotts, but it was just Wally. You'd just be watching Wally, waiting for Wally to do something. And when you look back at some of the games Wally played, Wally was sometimes shithouse. But in the big games, he would just tear guys apart. Any big game, he would just tear teams apart. But just on a week basis, you watch highlights of the Broncos, you think, mate, Sanderson does freaking nothing. But then again, the good players do nothing. They're still effective, I guess. Yeah.
Mate, you're 100% right. I've sort of noticed that myself. I even like sometimes in State of Origins, obviously Wally Lewis ruled that as a cauldron and they're huge games. There were just times where I think just his presence, like he didn't need to even get his hands on the ball. It was the presence of him being near the ruck that kind of made the difference. He was a very unusual player like that.
Yeah, mate, he's a solid unit too. He wasn't a small man. Wally's a really, really solid unit. But yeah, no, people just hang off the good players for some reason. They give them that little bit of respect. You shouldn't. You get up and knock them out.
Yeah.
And in this modern day, you see these guys that try to gain the same respect. Like Cooper Cronk's a really good example. He's the sort of bloke that need to be treated with the same respect as Wally Lewis is, and give himself time and all that. And he used to do that really, really well. But now they're not respecting him anymore. They just run out and just freaking knock and hit him hard, and he's starting to ask the questions, what's happened to my respect? And maybe that should have happened to these guys years ago. Maybe these guys that stood up there and ball played and, got treated respectfully, maybe they should have been held up a little bit easier too. But still, at the end of the day, these guys like Cooper Cronk and that, they get up and they still play the game and win the basket for their teams. So,
yeah, that's right.
Just, the good players just way ahead of everyone else, and they talk about the big money they get and all that sort of stuff. They warrant it every day of the week. They do so much for the club, and they do so much for the game.
100%, mate. And look, you're an interesting player as well, Rob, because I guess in a way you've done it all in rugby league. You did 2 grand final wins. You've won Origin series. You've played for Australia. I'm just wondering, is there any particular achievement in there that you kind of hold higher than anything else?
Playing with Dad was pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Only because it was in front of our home crowd, and we had a move that involved me and him. The halfback comes around the 5'8", and then he shows and steps one inside and then passes it off his hip to the big fella coming through the middle, sort of thing.
Yeah,
and
right.
As the game started, Dad sort of went up, and for some reason, big front row, he decides he's allowed to take the taps because he's the captain. He can do whatever he wants. He tosses the coin, take the goal, kicks if he wants, but he takes the taps. Not the hooker takes the caps and he runs onto it.
Yep.
I'm going to take the tap. So he sort of went up to take the tap, and he just, as he's walking up, he goes, mate, stay on the blind side. Just stay on the left-hand side of me. I'm going to tap it, and just as I go hit the line, I'm going to pop it short to him. Mate, they wouldn't even expect that. So I said, good idea, mate. Good idea. Not stand out where a 5'8" should be. Just come around the back of me and stand on the blind side near the wing. Yeah, mate, no problem. So, good idea. So anyway, Dad just tapped it and just stood there, put the ball underneath his arm and stood there. And this was against East, like Johnny Lang's team, and they ran, and they all sort of stopped wondering what he was doing, and then they took off again, and Dad turned around and just gave it to me, just handed the ball straight to me, and they just decked me. So he come and tapped me on the head and went, welcome to first grade, son. And that was my first touch in that game.
Mate, so I take it you and your old man never dusted that move off again after that?
No, so that move never happened again. But 20 minutes later, when his bum was hanging out, he was 130 kilo forward front rower.
Yeah.
And mate, shadow player for the first ever State of Origin. Dad played for Queensland Country. He was a good old player. So
yeah.
I've called looked around for him, and we're 10 metres out from the line, and I seen him right over the other side of the field, his hands on hips and sort of bending over a bit, sucking the wind in. And I went, oh, look at this. Double was the move. Double, big fella, get over here. And his eyes pricked up and away he went. He sprinted 60 metres across the field to get ready for this move. So anyway, the little halfback double around me. As I took a step forward, the big gap opened because the one guy chased him, one guy chased me. And as the big gap opened, I just went to flick the ball off me hip to Dad. And Dad sort of ran straight through the gap. I pulled the ball back out of his hand. I didn't give it to him. Flicked it over the winger, and the winger scored in the corner. And then I turned to Dad, which was actually standing over the try line, untouched. And he sort of looked at me, shaking his head. And I said, mate, I'll be in first grade for a long time yet, buddy. and just walked back to halfway. So I ended up getting him back.
That's great, mate. Mate, I read only a couple of years ago, I was reading an article that you'd made a rugby league cutback for the Magpies. Is that right? You made a...
I did.
Yeah. How did that go?
Mate, that happened with 1,000 beers up my guts. So I was just sitting there with my brother, and I said, you know what, I've played football with Dad, but I've never played football with you. He goes, you haven't? I said, well, I'm still able-bodied. Should give it a crack. And he was playing for Gloucester at the time. So he goes, well, come sign up for a game at Gloucester. I said, yeah, bloody oath I will. And like I said, well, had a gut full of beer, and yeah, no worries. So I go online and register me. So we register. But the next morning, I just didn't even know it happened. So the next morning, the Matty John show rings up. You just registered. Tell us about it. I said, what have I done? So anyway, Matty Johns makes it national news. So instead of just slipping out to Gloucester for one bloody game, I'm now on the Matty Johns show, made it national news. So I go over there for a whole bloody season, don't I? So I was out there, and mate, it was fun playing with my brother. It was fun playing with blokes, and mate, just sit in the dressing rooms and listen and smell the liniment and listen to the blokes talk. And, you know, in our game, because we're all professional about the way we go it, we are about where we have to be at certain parts at the time, you know, the moves, about this, you know, what's going to happen at this stage, just earn the right to play football, all that sort of stuff, you know. In the dressing rooms of local games, mate, it's about whose head they're going to rip off and who's cheating on whose wife. And it's just bloody crazy stuff. You're just sitting there going, jeez, is this really happening? But then there's this moment of silence when they all turn their head to you and just wait for your motivational speech. And you got nothing because you're overawed by their speeches. You just feel like saying, listen, guys, I just want to let you know that, you know, I've never touched any of your wives. Just give that sort of speech rather than who's going to win and just in case I knock you out.
My God.
I enjoyed that side of it. I love the side. I love the liniment. I love the yarns and the beers after the game and all that sort of stuff. But this disrespect out in the field, you know, the guys that come up and, oh, you got nothing, Davis, and all, and then they hit you in the head after you. It just, come on, guys, just enjoy the fact I'm out here.
That's right.
And I'm 46 years of age. Like that was the biggest problem. And I tell them all, I say, okay, so I didn't step around you. They go, you got nothing. Okay, I know, mate, I didn't step around you, but I'm 46, you're 20, okay? Get over it. So I said, if you still look fit like me when you're 46, mate, awesome, keep going. You know?
That's it.
So just stuff like that. So, and I got deterred from it. I ended up absolutely hating the fact I played that year because of disrespect from the other teams. Instead of just enjoying my company, they disrespected it. And we're playing third grade. We're not playing for bloody cattle stations. So they should have just said, no, it's a third grade game. Let's just play for a nice beer with Robbie after the game and everyone's happy. But when you go back to the pub after the game, all the guys that try to knock you out, they're your best mates.
That's it.
Sign my shirt, brother. No, just try to knock me out, you dickhead.
No, I won't. Mate, and you know what? They're probably just trying to bask in your reflected glory, Robbie, you know, because I guess, if it is third grade, they'd just be kind of, I guess, motivated to be on the field with you. Maybe that's just their way of showing it, even though it probably came across as disrespectful, I don't know. But did you cross the white stripe too many times?
Mate, I just did it once. I ended up backing someone up and just finishing off what they started. I put a dinner suit on. Don't worry about it. I had to show up for work, not like in the old days. My work was football. I had to show up for work the next morning, so I put the dinner suit on and made sure that stayed on.
Mate, very nice work. Well, look, absolute kudos for getting back out there, mate. At 46, mate, that's a testament to. Obviously, you're still in great physical shape. I'm in my 30s, and I have to say, if I went into a first grade or third grade field for that matter, I would shatter like a Ming vase. So definitely,
Don't do that.
yeah, I'm definitely not going to do that, mate. Just on the current state of things before I let you go. Obviously, the state of origin's going on, and you're a proud Queenslander. Did you have any thoughts on, I guess, who's going to win Game 3, and I guess how do you think Queensland fared in Game 2? Obviously, the score wasn't very flattering. Where do you reckon they're tracking at the moment?
Well, as we stand now, I think the origin was lost from Queensland's point of view when Kalen pulled the pin this morning. So
yeah, it's shocking news, isn't it?
Yeah. So the thing is, and I'll mention it just on Kalen Ponga himself. I'll mention it at the start of the year, just on a speak show or something, that someone with glutes that big, the big base he's got on him. I won't say this in case Kalen's listening. He's going to think he's got a fat ass, but he's got a massive power base, and to move laterally the way he does, at the same speed he does forward, something's going to give. And I always said, I've never seen someone move laterally, that's sideways and forwards at the same speed with such a big base like that. So something's going to give. And like the Benji Marshalls and this Johnson, they're little guys. They're little guys with massive big steps.
Yeah.
This guy's a big ass kid that's got massive power base there, and something's going to give. And I just really think that he's going to end up with real bad ankle damage, real bad calf damage, and it's funny because I mentioned his calves, and now that's what went. So,
Yeah.
And all these things with his lower legs are just starting to give in. Like he was in a boot last year as well. So, mate, look at stepping that powerfully. Something's got to bloody give. And that's why everyone's amazed by it. They're all going, mate, no one's ever seen nothing like it before.
Yeah, he's a unique runner of the ball, isn't he? And I guess people made some comparisons with Tedesco. He had a bit of a kamikaze running style as well, but he's sort of grown into his body a little bit. Do you think that Ponga might end up, even though he has that unusual style, as you said, and makes him more prone to injuries, that as he gets older, he might sort of fill out and grow into his body, or does he need to change his style?
Yeah, I think it's just, I think he doesn't work too much on his weights around the leg area because he's got that power base already. So I think there's a few things down there, or other way around, or he knows that there's a massive power base for him and he's getting him where he needs to go. He might be overworking that area. So by overworking them areas, he's obviously going to get stressed in his lower back, and then mate, the injuries are going to happen down below. So a fair bit. So mate, and we know 99% of injuries is stress. So if he's carrying stress in his body anywhere, he's just going to get them injuries down low. So, and the pressure's on him as such a young kid to maybe win this bloody Origin match, and come back and still perform at a high level. So, mate, what's more stressful than that for a young kid? And he's making so much an impact at such a young age. Mate, that's pure stress. So, and like I said, 99% injuries from stress, and if he's stressing like that, mate, things are going to give. Mate, same again. I think when they lost Kalen, it's a big comeback from there. So what do? I don't think Moses Mbai's good enough to be an Origin fullback. He's good enough to come off the bench and fill in at his spot.
Yeah.
But if they even think twice about putting Darius Boy there, they've got to wake up themselves. That would be the worst call he's done, unfortunately. Darius, he's one year past his used by date, mate. So I think he proved that the other night. He's proved that in the last few games. Darius, great player. Yeah. But he's just past his used by date. And we talk about them players that go 1 year too many, don't you? You always talk about them player that does it all the time. And I think Darius done it. But so where do you look? I don't know.
It's a tough one, isn't it, Robbie? They're talking about potentially putting Milford at the back. How do you see that one as a potential move to have, Milford coming and then, I don't know.
The other day, he was lethal. He was a lethal fullback for Canberra Raiders. Remember, he was just so bloody good. Yeah. But he's also a short fullback. So short fullbacks don't fare too well. I've learnt that.
I wasn't going to say anything, Robbie, but yeah.
Yeah, but with short fullbacks, you've got to learn to be taller than the other bars on the field. And he hasn't been taller for a long time. So when he was down in Canberra, he learned to be tall because he was playing fullback week in, week out. I learned to be tall because I was playing fullback. So he's been in the defensive line. His hips are dropped and everything's sort of about getting down low and driving through hard, and big defensive lines. So, yeah, to get tall again and catch a ball above people's heads, they just do it, mate. Look at bloody that guy from Manly. What's the guy that scored the 4 tries? Whatever he's
Yeah.
Travojevic. Look what Travojevic done to Ponga. Imagine what he'd do to freaking a little short bloke. So
Yeah, no, it's a good point.
yeah, so mate, it's going to be hard, and they're going home too. New South Wales are at home now, and yeah, I think as soon as they said Ponga's out, that's our guy's done. But I've played in state Origin sides that have had about 4 or 5 Origin players, and the rest are Neville's, remember? So
Yep.
we still won back with Fatty Bolton, say never write us off.
100%, mate. Especially when it comes to Queensland, as a New South Welshman myself, it's one of those things that you just can never underestimate it. Every now and then they can field a really depleted side, and then they play like they're possessed. So so it's Origin. It's always going to be tight. I get the feeling this game might be tighter than people think. So we'll see how it goes.
Let's hope it doesn't rain.
That's it, mate.
we're no good in the rain.
Robbie, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you, man. Thanks so much for sparing some time to come on the voluntary tackle today. And, mate, your insight, actually, it's fascinating just to hear about your career. It's obviously a lot of, I'm sure we've just touched the surface on some of the stories. So, if you get a chance down the track, we'd love to have you back on.
Mate, if not that, I'm sure we'll share a beer in the local pub and we'll knock over some stories with the truth in them.
Sounds great, mate.
We might stretch the truth a little bit too.
Mate, you're a legend. Thanks so much, and hopefully we'll chat soon, mate.
Mate, thanks, and thanks for inviting me on the podcast.
No worries, buddy. Thank you.
A big thanks again to Robbie for coming on the show. I genuinely really enjoyed that chat, and hopefully we can do that again soon. Look, that actually brings us to the end of the show. What I've learned from another great podcast at Sports Best Friends, if you haven't heard of them, they do a great thing at the end of their show where they pay it forward, as it were. They let everyone know, which podcast they're listening to and what they enjoy. Obviously, it goes without saying, if you love your rugby league, check out Sports Best Friends. It's an excellent podcast. Another one that I quite like is Woody and Slugs. If you're into your betting, they'll certainly give you the 411 there, and they've just got a good dynamic. I've always enjoyed it. And another one I've got into lately is the Matty Johns podcast. If you don't like Paul Kent, maybe not the podcast for you, but very funny, a lot of great anecdotes, and Matty knows how to tell a story better than anyone. So they're my picks for this week. And another thing I have to say is, if you do like the show, could you please go onto iTunes, share it around on Twitter or on social media, because it certainly helps us out a lot, and you can keep our insanity going. So I don't have a joke prepared or anything. All I want to say is, for the love of God, until next time, Mitchell, please have a good game at Origin. See you next time.